Welcome again to Searching the Heart, part 2 of what we started in the Theology of Leadership. Part 2 of the Theology of Leadership. Today we'll be looking at how D-Way affected Nigeria and its economy. Okay, we were able to look at Hutchins and D-Way. Hutchins believed that education is to prepare people for life, and D-Way believed that education is to prepare people for a job. Now we're able to begin to look at how the importance of Hutchins' idea, that Hutchins provides a balance between the formal and the informal sectors. Hutchins helps us to engage the excesses of over-specialization, which is a vital balance that is needed to provide for generations to do away with bad leadership and away with corruption, avoiding the creation of political cults, to hijack the polity for personal and for parochial gains. But today we will be going ahead to look at some of the effects of D-Way's system in a country like Nigeria, how it has affected Nigeria. Now, D-Way has a few things in his favor as far as the developing world is concerned. The African hierarchical age, the African hierarchical age grade system is something that builds a foundation for D-Way to take over. Africans believe so much in hierarchy. Of course, they practice a patriarchal system, but not always. There are some places where it is actually a matriarchal system. But age plays a very important role in this. The older people tend to have more say in the household, in government, and in every other thing. And because of this is sympathetic towards D-Way's arrangement. Of course, older people tend to be first in line in many things, and so, of course, we'll tend to be at the head of the pyramid than the younger ones. And so, it is very sympathetic to the D-Way system. So, Africans mostly practice something similar to what D-Way encourage. Number 2, this idea merged with religious sentiments, like in Islam, in Christianity. Anyway, the form of Christianity that was practiced here in Africa. Of course, the Ten Commandments emphasized the obedience of elders. So this was very sympathetic to such religious sentiments. And of course, Africa is a very religious continent. And of course, it gave rise to felt needs as opposed to Western culture. There is felt needs of Africans. Of course, they find it D-Way sympathetic to those felt needs, and so this is naturally popular for Africans. Number 3, the military regimes practice mostly a form of socialist government. Now, this precipitated a socialist culture among the people, which meant that business and amenities were only accessed in community form, not by individuals, and hence the formation of professional associations and market associations. So because basic amenities and business opportunities were only properly accessed through associations, at a point in time in the in the development of Nigeria, this became an issue. Although individuals were able to access businesses, were able to practice their businesses very freely for a very long time, the political crises gave birth to governments that would only, and the increase in population. Governments that would only listen to people when they were organized in community form. Of course, this did not reduce even after the transition to civil rule or democracy. It in fact increased. People began to form associations to protect their businesses. From transport, the transporters that became very, very influential in the trade economy that Nigeria had. It was a consumer economy. And so transporters became very important. They formed associations. The market women, they formed associations. And these were very strong blocks, influential blocks. The labor movements, they formed associations. Very influential. And these grew and became the community movements, the Angwa movement. So every Angwa began to have an association. This was in parallel to the tribal associations that already existed. So everything in Nigeria became about associations and not about the individual. Okay? So this is what happened because of the military, the long military regimes that persisted. Number 4, why Dewey became very popular. Of course, before I go there, let me round it up by saying, of course, with associations there has to be leadership. And of course, that promoted Dewey, a way of sharing these resources. And Dewey's system seemed organized. And so Dewey would be far more popular than just a general allusion to training for life for the purpose of surviving in life. Number 4, the proliferation of African culture meant that Western education was considered alien and caused the discouragement of innovation. Okay, this was a very, very pungent factor when we were growing up early in the 80s. Of course, Nigeria was only in the 80s. Nigeria was only about 30 years or so, close to about 30, 20 something to 30 years old. And this was a time where so many Nigerians had innovated, had become experts in engineering. And because of this, there were a lot of complaints that these Nigerians were being attracted abroad. These Nigerians were not being supported to become world-renowned inventors. And the reason was primarily because Western education was considered an alien culture. And because of this, there was a discouragement of innovation. That means that such innovations and innovators were attracted overseas because there was no market for them in Nigeria, or they faced the threat of their inventions being stolen by big business. And so this was a very pungent factor in the development of Nigeria, and this was caused, of course, because of the very strict hierarchical nature. And those leaders would not encourage innovation because they believed that such innovators threatened their leadership. If a man became popular because of his invention, of course he became a leader, and this was an issue. This created a bloated civil service, as government was seen as the best employer and market regulator. Now, up to date, the private sector is considered by many not to be a stable employer, and self-employed people are considered as unemployed because of the long socialist culture of the Nigerian government. If you're self-employed, you are better unemployed. Well, it is getting better. There are a lot of self-employed people in Nigeria today because of the transition, of course, to civil rule, and because of Babangida's SAP program that liberalized the economy a little. That is the Structural Adjustment Program. But even today, that idea that the private sector or a self-employed person is still unemployed is still very rife. Because government is considered the best and the only employer. Of course, this also still preserves that hierarchical system of dewey. The most devastating blow to the Nigerian polity was the church's acceptance of the dewey system. Now we must understand that religions like Islam have their own form of trade system, of course, in which mentoring is practiced, and of course the Islamic system is practiced. But a very, very important participant in the economy was the church, also the Christian church. And the Christian church, while understanding and accepting socialist models, is one of the best and only pathways through which capitalism can be understood and accepted, because it is practiced in the United States and in Europe. But this was delivered a very, very effective blow when the church accepted Dewey without understanding the difference between what Dewey was saying and what Hutchins was saying. The church accepted the Dewey discipleship system and imbibed it into church polity, church discipleship. This sealed the fate of Nigeria for at least 20 to 50 years and aided the slow end of So we're talking about how this created a bloated civil service. Government was seen as the best and only employer, and up to today, the private sector is considered to be not a very stable employer, and people who are self-employed are considered unemployed. So the most devastating blow, though, to the Nigerian economy and polity as a whole, was that the Christian church accepted Dewey, the Dewey system, as a discipleship system without properly clarifying between the two. Well, I would say that some of the movers of this system take their time to actually clarify, but the problem really comes in practice. It is easier for people to practice the Dewey system than to practice the Hutchins system, and because of that, once you allude to such a system, of course, you would probably most likely practice Dewey, and this is what happened, literally. So this was a devastating blow to Nigeria as a country, because this gave way to the insurgency that started after the Olusegun Obasanjo administration, and a lot of people play down on the effects of the Dewey system in what happened in Nigeria. Even in the leadership that took over Nigeria, the Yaradua government that took over Nigeria, the Yaradua government was a direct result of the practice of the Dewey system. And of course, insurgency took over because of the disagreements between the leaders at stake, and also the predominant practice or agreement, the silent agreement within Nigeria itself. Now, that gives rise within the silent agreement within Nigerians about what system is better for Nigeria. Okay, that gives me the opportunity to tackle point number 8. And point number 8 is that the informal sector and formal sector were already ruled by the Dewey system. Okay, They were already ruled by the Dewey system. And the issue that we get to understand in the informal system practiced in Nigeria is that though it is the best catalyst for Hutchins system, that means training people for life, leadership issues make sure that instead of the Hutchins system, it is the Dewey system that rules, because people only probably trained or get into any apprenticeship program for the sake of getting a job, of course feeding their families. You see a child that just finishes primary school go into trade, which was popular with the Igbos and also popular with the Hausas, okay? Or a child that maybe he tries hard and he finishes secondary school and of course ignores the university and goes into trade. And so of course practically it was the Dewey system that was being practiced, but in a system that would have been very good for the Hutchins system to be practiced. So this is what happened, okay? So combined with the cultural and religious disdain for Western culture, this created a muted sympathy for the Boko Haram insurgency. Now this is very, very important. This is very, very important. And this is what we're experiencing up to today. It's gradually fading away, but it is still a very real threat that many Nigerians, while struggling under the terrorism of the Boko Haram insurgency, have silent sympathies for the Boko Haram, the principles that guide the Boko Haram. That means they look at Western education as a diversionary system, as not concurrent with African values. So this is what happened, and of course the church played a very important role in this by practicing the discipleship system that proliferated the Dewey system instead of Hutchins system. There were one or two preachers that would actually preach in such a way that would give credit to Hutchins, but at the same time practiced discipleship in such a way that Dewey was elevated, being so strict on the kind of leadership that a mentor could give to the mentee, okay? And of course in practice the kind of discipline or punishments that were meted out on so-called deviants of society, gave more credit to Hutchins. And of course this was a principle that was shared between the so-called Boko Haram insurgents and those far-right people who had a far-right ideology within the church. And secretly, while fighting one another, I mean the Boko Haram and those who resisted the Boko Haram, agreed on these points. And so there was a larger sympathy for the Boko Haram insurgency, and it is creating the problems we're facing in Nigeria today. So this is what we need to understand as to how Dewey affected the Nigerian economy. And today Nigeria is struggling with these issues, and it is torn apart, literally torn apart, whether to accept a capitalist system or a socialist system. And of course, because a good number of our people practice a form of capitalism, it's so difficult for them to understand. And somehow they have been oriented through discipleship in the church, and of course in their own religions and in the traditional religions, to depend on government, on a social structure. And some of them are still practicing trade, forms of capitalism. And so there's that confusion within the polity. And it is creating this very bad leadership model for our children, okay? While still not imprisoned, but agreeing with the Dewey system, the strict hierarchical Dewey system. So this is creating the crisis, and it's seen in the very poor performance of the Nigerian currency, especially. And some of us will ask the question, why So many good, wonderful figures are being quoted in the media, and the Nigerian currency is still suffering. And that is the reason, because inside it there is a confusion. And these two systems are primer to understanding this confusion. The practice of these two systems. There is no clear understanding of what system is better than the other. Whether the Dewey or the Hutchins, whether a capitalist or socialist. So these are the problems that we are facing here in Nigeria. And my purpose of doing this video is to help us to understand this, so that we can chart a way for the future. And this will help us to remove certain corrupt practices, like sidetracking from the issues, and putting children in front of video cameras, okay, to help those elites to steal ideas of visionaries that can be used to build the Nigerian economy, and put it back into the hands of those who are literally raping our economy and our continent again of its resources and taking it outside Nigeria, because they favor large-scale importation of goods as against innovation within Nigeria. So this is the problem that we must understand. And I am David Dungi Chinke for you today in Searching the Heart.